to Anglais Advanced. Cassette 2, Side A. How do Americans feel about doing business in Europe? Are the British really a nation of beer drinkers? On this side, we travel to the States and Britain to answer these questions. But first, we go underground in New York.
The New York subway has a reputation for being dirty and dangerous. But an organisation known as the Guardian Angels decided to do something about the violence. The Guardian Angels are instantly recognisable by their red berets. They go around in patrols, unarmed, at all hours of the day and night, ready to protect passengers from any would-be attackers. Vivienne went to the Guardian Angels headquarters and spoke to its leader and founder, Curtis Sliwa. But first, she travelled on the subway and asked some passengers for their reactions.
Well, in Europe, we hear an awful lot about the reputation of the New York subway as being very dirty and very dangerous. Does it live up to its reputation?
The graffiti doesn't bother me, but the filth does. I mean, the dirt around the seats and the windows.
Are you scared traveling on the subway?
No, I'm not a native New Yorker, but I've been here since like 71. So I have this feeling that I'm invincible, which is really not true. I don't ride late at night, and I don't ride very early morning. If I travel early morning or late night, I take a bus or a cab.
Now, if you were coming into New York and you were on your own and you had to get from A to B, say, at 9 o'clock at night, would you travel by the subway or would you think twice about it?
A cab. Or else I would have my car with me. I wouldn't take the subway. And when my sister, I know, was taking the subway, I always call her and say, "Did you get home okay?" How could you be on the subway at 9 o'clock at night? It's okay during rush hour because there are tons of people, but I think in off hours, it's not great at all.
Now, although some of what these passengers said wasn't very difficult, they did speak quite quickly. Listen and repeat some of their sentences to practice your fluency.
If I travel early morning or late night, I take a bus or a cab.
Repeat.
If I travel early morning or late night, I take a bus or cab.
Now, put it together. Listen and repeat.
If I travel early morning or late night, I take a bus or a cab.
How could you be on the subway at 9 o'clock at night?
Listen and repeat.
How could you be on the subway at 9 o'clock at night?
Now put it together. Listen and repeat.
How could you be on the subway at 9 o'clock at night?
Now let's listen to some of the expressions that were used.
Does it live up to its reputation?
Repeat.
To live up to its reputation.
Does this mean?
To be the same as one's reputation, to have a terrible reputation. To be the same as one's reputation.
For example,
people say that restaurant is wonderful, and it's true. That restaurant lives up to its reputation.
Now change this sentence to use the phrase, to live up to its reputation.
I don't think the New York subway is as dangerous as people say it is. I don't think the New York subway lives up to its reputation.
The graffiti doesn't bother me.
Repeat.
To bother.
Does this mean?
To interest, to worry. To worry. To bother, to worry.
For example,
Please don't worry me with your problems. Please don't bother me with your problems.
now you use to bother to change this sentence.
Please don't disturb me when I'm working. Please don't bother me when I'm working.
So I have this feeling that I'm invincible, which is really not true.
Repeat.
I'm invincible.
Does this mean?
I have a lot of courage. Nothing can hurt me. Nothing can hurt me. I'm invincible. Nothing can hurt me.
For example,
Nobody seems to be able to affect Mrs. Thatcher. Mrs. Thatcher seems to be invincible.
now use invincible to change this sentence.
Napoleon thought that nothing could defeat him. Napoleon thought he was invincible.
Would you travel by the subway or would you think twice about it?
Repeat.
To think twice about something.
Does this mean?
To think about it very carefully. To change your mind. To think about it very carefully. To think twice. To think about something very carefully.
And now we go over to the guardian angels. But first, here's some vocabulary that may help you.
Pimps. Men who have prostitutes working for them. Pushers. People who sell drugs. The urban inner core area. The very center of the city. A tenement. An apartment building in a poor neighborhood. A vigilante. A member of an unofficial group concerned with security.
And now listen to what Curtis Sliwa, the head of the Guardian Angels, has to say about his organization.
Well, the organization started back in February of 1979. At the time, I was a night manager of a McDonald's hamburger operation, but in the worst of neighborhoods, the South Bronx. So amongst the burned out buildings, the numerous gangs that were everywhere at that time, the dope dealers, the pimps, the pushers, the prostitutes, it was a very unsightly setting. And naturally, crime was everywhere. Actually, the slow movement towards organizing young men, young women, mostly minority from that inner city area, to at that point go down into the subway and without weapons, no special powers or privileges, even having to pay the fare, at that time 75 cents to ride the subway, just to protect the people who, along with getting attacked on the streets, as was very common, were even more so getting attacked on this one particular subway line.
And what kind of people want to become guardian angels?
Well, we obviously have had our greatest success in the urban inner core area, where most of the violent crime occurs, most of the drug problems are, most of the minorities live. So your typical guardian angel tends to be young, anywhere from 16 to 19 years old, usually from a public housing project or an urban ghetto tenement, broken family, maybe poor education, not much going for him or her, could well have been a gang member, a drug dealer, a pimp, a prostitute, or a gangster, maybe if it had not been for the guardian angels.
But you're not armed, so how do you deal with these criminals who I suppose sometimes are armed? What are your defenses?
Well, we do a very un-American thing. The United States is known for gun power. The bad guys get bigger guns, the good guys get even bigger guns. We don't believe in that philosophy. We feel that we are primarily role models and peacemakers. You cannot be a peacemaker, though, when you approach somebody with either a stick, a knife, a baton, a gun. But our ability is to jump into a situation, as hot as it might be, as violent as it might appear to be, and be the calming element, even if we have to absorb a lot of the abuse. And we would not be as well received by the community, nor as well accepted for what we do by both criminal and good people if we were carrying weapons.
What is the public reaction to you? Are you ever seen as a sort of vigilante group, as a threat?
At first, we were stigmatized by the word vigilante. I'd have to be honest, and most people were terrified of us. They would clutch their pocketbook, pull their groceries, bring their children in. They had no idea what to anticipate. They were looking at predominantly young Black and Hispanic faces. They had known these people more often than not to be predators, gang members. How were you suddenly just to entrust them because of this red beret? So it took many, many months and years of actual service, on the job, courtesy, consistency. And finally, people were rolling out the red carpet, and now we're like the doughboys come back from the First World War.
Now, how much did you understand of what Curtis said? Give the answers to these questions, and then check your answers with the part of the interview we will play you again.
Was the initial reaction to the guardian angels fear, acceptance? Fear.
Listen.
I'd have to be honest, and most people were terrified of us.
Are most guardian angels from the suburbs, from the inner city? From the inner city.
Listen to how Curtis said it.
So your typical guardian angel tends to be young, anywhere from 16 to 19 years old, usually from a public housing project or an urban ghetto tenement.
Are the guardian angels unarmed, taught to use guns? Unarmed.
Check your answer.
We would not be as well received by the community, nor as well accepted for what we do by both criminal and good people if we were carrying weapons.
Now listen to some of the expressions used in the interview.
Well, we obviously have had our greatest success in the urban inner core area.
Repeat.
Core.
Does this mean?
Central, working class. Central. Core, the center or central part.
For example,
we must deal with the core of the problem, not just its effects.
We feel that we are primarily role models and peacemakers.
Repeat.
Role models.
Are role models
examples for other people to follow, people who have an artificial image. Examples for other people to follow. Role models. Examples for other people to follow.
For example,
pop stars are often role models for young people.
Even if we have to absorb a lot of the abuse.
Repeat.
Abuse.
Does this mean?
Bad criminals. Insults. Insults. Abuse. Insults.
For example,
he just opened his mouth and let out a stream of abuse.
At first, we were stigmatized by the word vigilante.
Repeat.
Stigmatized.
Does this mean?
Given a reputation, given bad treatment. Given bad treatment. Stigmatized, given bad treatment.
For example,
she was stigmatized because of her poor family background.
And finally, people were rolling out the red carpet.
Repeat.
To roll out the red carpet.
Does this mean?
To treat with great honor and respect. To make a gesture of victory. To treat with great honor and respect. To roll out the red carpet. To treat with great honor and respect.
For example,
people will roll out the red carpet to give a special welcome to a VIP, a very important person. Here, of course, Curtis is using the expression figuratively.
But our ability is to jump into a situation, as hot as it might be, as violent as it might appear to be.
Repeat.
As hot as it might be.
Listen to the example.
I always take a cab. Expensive. I always take a cab, as expensive as it might be.
Now you transform the sentences in the same way.
He accepts every assignment. Difficult. He accepts every assignment, as difficult as it might be.
Now listen to another way of saying the same thing.
He accepts every assignment, however difficult it is.
Now use however to complete these sentences. For example,
I'll pay the bill. Expensive. I'll pay the bill, however expensive it is.
now you do it.
I'll do what he says. Crazy. I'll do what he says, however crazy it is. Take the first flight early. I'll take the first flight, however early it is.
And now for just a little grammar. Listen.
What is the public reaction to you? Are you ever seen as a sort of vigilante group, as a threat?
Repeat.
Are you ever seen as?
And finally, people were rolling out the red carpet, and now we're like the doughboys come back from the First World War.
Repeat.
We're like the doughboys.
As and like. As can be used in many contexts, but we usually use like before a noun or pronoun. For example,
He's just like his father.
now you put as or like in each sentence where you hear the sound signal. For example,
It sounds if he got lost. It sounds as if he got lost.
now you do it.
When in Rome, do the Romans do. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Isn't that just a man? Isn't that just like a man?
It isn't that at all. It isn't like that at all.
What's it like for Americans to do business in Europe? Hal Tepler is an American who distributes video cassettes internationally, in France, Germany, and Italy. But he insists business is still best in the U.S. David asked him why.
Number one, you have a numbers game. In the United States, you have 250 million consumers that spend money. There isn't another place in the world like this. Even in 1992, when the European market comes together, they're going to have 300 million people, but you're still going to have 300 million people that don't spend very much money. They certainly don't spend money like Americans do. Their spendable money is very limited. They save their money. Americans don't save. We spend. We live on credit. So in general, the marketplace is here in America.
Would you say that the components of deal making are the same in Europe as they are here?
I think that basically a deal is a deal anywhere. You know, in Europe, in Germany, and so on. You have two businessmen that they want something from each other. You know, and the bottom line is money. So a deal is a deal. I think that in America, time is of the essence. There is really a difference in the culture. You have a marketplace here where stores are open, retail stores are open weekends and weeknights and Sundays, and everything in America is made to sell. And in Europe, the main priority is not selling.
Can you do business in Europe on a handshake, or must you have everything in writing in a contract?
Well, I think that it really depends on the individual. I can say that I've had problems in all countries. I mean, it's a matter of personalities. I've had good experiences and bad experiences no matter where I've gone. And at one time, I used to believe that in Europe, you could shake somebody's hand and the deal was firm. But it seems to me that as the world becomes more Americanized, it's a matter of you better count your fingers after you shake somebody's hand.
Now listen to some of the expressions used in this interview.
Would you say that the components of deal making are the same in Europe as they are here?
Repeat.
Components.
Does this mean the aspects?
The parts.
The parts. Components. The different parts of something. For example,
sometimes it's better to import the components and assemble them here.
And listen again.
The components of deal making.
Repeat.
Deal making.
Does this mean making agreements?
Large-scale business.
Making agreements. To make a deal. To make an agreement, especially in business. For example,
he made a very good deal with a company in Hong Kong.
And we also have the expression, it's a deal, which means it's agreed.
And the bottom line is money.
Repeat.
The bottom line.
Does this mean the lowest element?
The final result.
The final result. The bottom line. The final result. Usually in financial terms. For example,
this project is interesting, but what's the bottom line?
Can you do business in Europe on a handshake?
Repeat.
To do business on a handshake.
If you do business on a handshake, do you sign a contract?
Make a verbal agreement.
You make a verbal agreement.
To do business on a handshake. To make a verbal agreement.
But Hal says that times have changed. Listen.
It's a matter of you better count your fingers after you shake somebody's hand.
Notice that he says, you better, as a short form of you'd better, you had better. Now, you use you'd better to give advice. For example,
I haven't got any money.
Job. You'd better get a job. Now you do it.
I've got a terrible headache.
Aspirin. You'd better take some aspirin.
My car's pretty old and doesn't run so well.
A new one. You'd better get a new one.
To drink or not to drink. Britain is famous for its pubs, and the British are traditionally regarded as a nation of beer drinkers. But now all this is changing, says Chris Fultz, an editor of wine books at a London publishing house. Michelle asked him to tell us about the latest trends in British drinking habits.
I think the image of Britain as a beer drinking country is out of date. Britain now is drinking wine at an ever-increasing rate. at the expense of beer and of hard spirits.
What can you attribute this change to? Are they becoming, British people becoming more cosmopolitan?
Yes, they're becoming more sophisticated. They travel far more this generation than their parents or their grandparents. Also, people drink at home far more. They entertain at home. I think a lot of the interest in wine is in parallel with the interest in cooking, because British people are far more interested in what they eat and drink than they were 30, 40 years ago.
Yes, the pub seems to have stayed and probably will stay the center of community, center of different neighborhoods and place where people meet. Or do you think that the current wine bar trend is going to overtake the local pub?
Well, wine bars and pubs are different places. You go to them for different reasons. The pub, I think, is a wonderful institution, and every time I go to Europe, I think it is wonderful to be in Europe, but it's a pity there are no pubs, because pubs are good places where you can eat or drink totally casually. Everybody uses them. As you say, they have a strong neighbourhood content. Wine bars are more for eating, more for younger people. Women go to wine bars far more freely and readily than they go to pubs. So there's still a certain amount of masculinity about a pub.
I believe there's a new law that's going to come into effect in the summertime when pubs will be able to stay open all day long. Do you think this is a good thing?
There's two schools of thought about this. Some people think it will spoil the atmosphere of the pub, but I think it's a good thing because it will increase a trend towards pubs being more cosmopolitan. Pubs are increasingly serving non-alcoholic drinks and food because it's belatedly been realised that you can't drink and drive. The British have been rather slow to catch on to the fact that you crash your car if you drink too much. But in the last year or 18 months, we've found more pubs serving non-alcoholic drinks, and it is all of a sudden now possible to drink a non-alcoholic drink without being seen as somebody with a medical problem or somebody who has strange tastes.
But on the other hand, I've read that in this trend towards becoming more continental, more sophisticated, many of the old-fashioned pubs are being redecorated. They're getting a new look, this sort of trendy, yuppie kind of look. Do you think that's going to change the attitude towards pubs?
Well, this has been going on for 20 or 30 years because the brewers love spending money on their pubs to try and make them more fashionable. But the British public, I think, apart from a few youngsters, stubbornly stick to the old-fashioned kind of pub. And it's noticeable in London that the chain of pubs, which is extremely simple and has bare floorboards and has real ale, is the most successful chain of all, and you can hardly get through the door in the evenings.
So, how well did you get on with the British and their drinking habits? Listen to some of the expressions from the interview and see if you understand them.
Britain now is drinking wine at an ever-increasing rate at the expense of beer and of hard spirits.
Repeat.
At the expense of beer.
Does this mean less beer is drunk?
Wine is cheaper.
Less beer is drunk. At the expense of increasing one thing by reducing another. For example,
The defence budget has increased because the hospital services have been given less money.
the defense budget has increased at the expense of hospital services. Now you use at the expense of to transform this sentence.
He got a lot of work done, but his health got very bad.
He got a lot of work done at the expense of his health. Listen again to Chris's sentence.
Britain now is drinking wine at an ever-increasing rate.
Repeat.
An ever-increasing rate.
Does this mean increasing a lot?
Increasing all the time.
Increasing all the time. Ever increasing. Increasing all the time. Ever, all the time. Listen to some other examples.
Pollution is a problem that is growing all the time.
Pollution is an ever-growing problem.
Now you use ever to transform the sentence.
The number of people who get married is decreasing all the time.
People are getting married in ever-decreasing numbers.
They're getting a new look, the sort of trendy, yuppie kind of look.
Repeat.
Trendy.
If people are trendy yuppies, are they very intellectual and socially aware?
Fashionable and materialistic.
Fashionable and materialistic.
Trendy. Fashionable in a slightly superficial way.
A yuppie. A young urban professional who is very materialistic.
For example,
London has lots of trendy wine bars that are full of yuppies.
now as Chris says, pubs are a very important part of British life. How much do you know about them? Try our quiz. Answer true or false to the following questions. For example,
A half of bitter is a half litre of beer.
false. It's a half a pint of beer. Now you do it.
Children aren't allowed in pubs.
True. Children aren't allowed in pubs, although some pubs have special rooms they can go into.
Draft beer comes out of a bottle.
False. Draft beer comes out of a barrel.
The landlord says last orders, 10 minutes before closing time.
True. 10 minutes before closing time, the landlord calls out, "Last orders, please." When the 10 minutes are up, he calls out, "Time, gentlemen, please."
Bitter, ale, Guinness, lager and shandy are all kinds of beer.
False. Shandy is half lemonade and half beer.
End of Side A.